I still remember the night my past walked through the door and sat down across from me like it had every right to be there. Christmas Eve, downtown. Seattle, the kind of restaurant where the forks are heavier than my entire cutlery drawer at home, and the light is soft enough to make everyone look a little richer, a little happier. I was sitting alone at a table for two, trying not to look like the girl who had obviously been stood up checking my phone every couple of minutes, and telling myself I didn't care, even though my stomach was in knots and my cheeks were burning. My best friend Lena had bullied me into this blind date because, in her words, I was one sad takeout order away from turning into a ghost. So I let her pick the place, pick the guy, pick everything, and I showed up in a thrift store dress and borrowed heels, pretending this was normal, pretending I belonged there. The minutes kept ticking. Couples kept coming in from the cold, laughing and brushing snow out of their hair. The waiter kept stopping by with that polite pity smile, asking if I wanted to wait a little longer, and I kept saying, "Yeah, it's fine. He's probably just stuck in traffic." Even though deep down I was thinking, of course I get stood up in a place like this. Who did I think I was? Around the time I'd decided to cut my losses, go home, microwave leftovers, and lie to Lena that it went okay, the hostess walked a new guest into the dining room, and the whole night tilted. He was tall, dark brown skin, navy suit that fit a little too perfectly, moving in that quiet, controlled way that said he was used to being listened to, not ignored. I noticed him the way you notice a storm rolling in, all instinct, first details later. And I remember thinking, whoever he's here to meet is really, really lucky. Then he turned his head, and I saw his profile, and my heart just stopped. I knew that jawline that way, his mouth tightened when he was concentrating, the way his shoulders rolled back when he was trying to look calm, even when he wasn't. For a second I thought my brain was playing tricks on me, because there was no way it was him, not here, not tonight, not like this. But it was. Jordan Hayes, the man who had once shared a mattress on my floor, and dreams over cold noodles, who had promised me forever, and then vanished from my life 5 years earlier, like I was a chapter he'd just decided to skip. The hostess led him right to my table, apologized for the reservation mix-up, and then walked away, leaving us staring at each other in this weird, suspended moment where the noise of the restaurant faded, and all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. "Maya," he said, and hearing my name in his voice again felt like being yanked straight back into a life I'd worked very hard to get over. For a second, I couldn't even answer. I just kind of nodded, because what do you say when the guy who broke you is suddenly your blind date? He looked as thrown as I felt. I didn't know it was you," he said quietly. "Lena just said she had a friend I needed to meet." And that was my first clue this wasn't some setup for his benefit. He really hadn't known either. So there we were, two people with way too much history and zero warning, sharing one very expensive table like some kind of cosmic joke. When the waiter came over, all smiles, asking what we wanted to drink, my instinct was to say, "Water choked down a bread roll," and run, but Jordan didn't even look at the menu. "Your best champagne," he said, and when I shot him a look, he added, "We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I asked. "Your excellent disappearing act." It came out sharper than I meant, but I wasn't sorry. He winced, and for a second, I saw the guy I used to know, the one who'd caved whenever I was mad, who'd crack a joke or make me tea just to fix it. This version just took a slow breath. "Celebrating the fact that you're here," he said softly, "and that I finally get to explain. I wish I could tell you I played it cool, stood up, told him he'd had his chance, and walked out with my pride intact. But that's not what happened. The truth is, I needed answers. 5 years is a long time to fill with guesses and late-night what-ifs. So I stayed. I listened. And what he told me that night flipped the story I'd been carrying around in my head completely upside down. Back when we were broke together before he became the guy in the Navy suit, he'd been tired all the time, always sore, always brushing it off as stress and overwork. Turns out it wasn't stress. It was a rare blood cancer that a free clinic had finally caught, and a specialist had confirmed. He slid a copy of his old lab results across the table like he'd been carrying them around, waiting for this moment. And there it was in black and white, along with the treatment estimate somewhere between $500,000 and almost $1 million to not die. We were splitting grocery bills and praying the rent check wouldn't bounce back then, and he had been handed a price tag on his life that looked like something from a different planet. "I didn't tell you," he said, and his voice shook when he said it, "because I knew what you'd do. You'd work yourself into the ground trying to save me. You'd take on more shifts, more stress, and it still wouldn't be enough. I couldn't watch that. I couldn't let you go down with me." Then right on cue comes the billionaire. Not in the restaurant, I mean, back then. Some investor named Victor Lang had shown up like a lifeline offering to pay for everything. Top specialists, hospital, all of it. And fund Jordan's software startup on top. But the contract came with strings attached, the kind that don't look like strings when you're scared and 20-something and trying not to die. The deal was brutal, immediate move to California, total focus on the company, zero contact with anyone from his old life for the duration of the contract. Especially me, because in their eyes, I was a distraction. The clause he pointed to with his finger actually used those words. "If I'd told you," he said, "you'd have tried to convince me to stay, or follow me into something we couldn't control, and I knew myself. I knew I'd cave, I'd stay with you, and refuse treatment, or ditch the investor and end up dead in some cheap apartment. I told myself that if you hated me, at least you'd move on. At least you wouldn't have to watch me disappear slowly." As sitting across from him in that restaurant, I felt two things at the same time, and they did not play nicely together. On one hand, this raw, ugly sympathy, because I could picture him hearing that diagnosis, seeing those numbers being offered, that deal, and grabbing it out of sheer terror. On the other hand, this white-hot anger because he had still made a choice for me without asking, decided I was too fragile to handle the truth, and left me thinking I'd been abandoned, not widowed. "You don't get to decide what hurts me less," I told him, and yeah, there were tears in my eyes. "You broke my heart and called it mercy." He nodded, actually nodded, like he'd had this argument with himself 100 times. "I know," he said, "and I've been trying to make it right ever since." After the contract ended and he didn't die, he'd gone looking for me, hired people, called old jobs, checked old addresses, but somehow every trail went cold. My file had been misplaced, my forwarding address lost, my social media inaccessible. It was like I'd disappeared. What I didn't know sitting in that restaurant was that we were both characters in someone else's little control experiment, and the real twist was still coming. Fast forward a couple of days, and I'm sitting in a glass conference room 20 floors up, the kind of office where the windows cost more than my car, because Jordan had called and asked me to meet him for real this time. He was there, nervous in a way billionaires probably don't like to look, and across from us sat a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a calm smile who introduced herself as Emily Lang, Victor's daughter. She slid a folder across the table, and what was inside felt like reading the director's commentary for my own life. Emails between Victor and his team discussing Jordan's emotional liabilities, which, surprise, was me. Notes about hiring people to track my movements, pay my old boss under the table to lose my contact information, make sure my new number wasn't easily linked back. One line casually mentioned, removing romantic distractions to ensure maximum productivity. I remember staring at that sentence and thinking, I got reduced to a bullet point in some rich man's plan. Emily sat there letting us read, then said, My father believed love made people weak. He was very good at building empires and very bad at being an actual human being. She explained that before he died, he'd set up a fund to compensate strategic casualties of his business practices, which is such a cold phrase I almost laughed. In that fund, there was a number next to my name and a number next to Jordan's, and those numbers were both 10 million. You don't have to take it, she said. I know it doesn't fix what he did, but you were harmed because he chose to control a situation that wasn't his to control, and this is the only way he knew how to make amends. I wish I could tell you I had some noble reaction, that I pushed the folder back and said, I don't want his dirty money. But the truth is messier. I thought about my mom, Denise, whose kidneys were failing, thanks to years of fighting diabetes with half measures and whatever the insurance company felt like approving that month. I thought about the stack of bills in my kitchen drawer, the ones I paid just enough on to keep the lights on. I thought about the nights I'd laid awake wondering whether I'd end up in that same broken body someday, and the way that kind of fear claws at you quietly. So yeah, I thought about $10 million. I also thought, you know what? If anyone deserves to drain his bank account, it's the people he played like chess pieces. Jordan and I argued about it for days in his car on the phone over takeout at my tiny kitchen table. Is it blood money if we use it to save lives? Or is refusing it just another way of letting a bad man win? In the end, we found a third option that felt like the only one we could live with. We took the money, all of it, and put it into a foundation we set up together, the Carter Hayes Fund, named after both our families, with one mission: pay for life, saving care for people who are being crushed under the same kind of system that almost wiped him out and almost took my mom. The first time we actually used it was on her. Her doctor laid it out very clearly. There was an experimental treatment that could actually repair some of the damage to her kidneys, give her years of real life back, instead of sliding slowly toward dialysis and complications. And of course, insurance wouldn't touch it. Sitting in that beige exam room listening to numbers that usually belong on house listings, I felt myself slip right back into that panicked version of me that used to stare at overdue notices until the words blurred, and before I could open my mouth, Jordan said, "We'll do it, whatever it costs." In the parking lot, I snapped at him because that's what you do when you've spent years having to ask permission from your bank account before you breathe. You can't just say yes to everything like it's nothing, I said. This is my mom, this is your money, this is complicated. He looked at me like he could see all the years of scraping by sitting on my shoulders. The money is not the important part, he said. Your mom is. And this isn't just my money, it's restitution. It's literally there to fix what powerful people break. We are allowed to let it do that. We made a deal because I need structure to feel like I'm not just being rescued. I would be involved in every decision about the foundation and my mom's care. I'd run the fund as an actual job with a real salary, not just be the grateful girlfriend, and anything we used on my mom would be paid back into the fund over time as we grew it. He agreed, no hesitation. Maybe that was the moment I realized he wasn't just trying to erase his guilt with grand gestures. He wanted to build something with me, not for me. The foundation grew faster than I expected. We helped a single dad whose son needed a bone marrow transplant and whose insurance decided it was not medically necessary, which is wild, because I'm pretty sure being alive is medically necessary. We helped a retired teacher pick up her heart meds without having to choose between them and groceries. We helped a kid with the same rare blood disorder Jordan had, and I watched Jordan sit by that kid's hospital bed and say, "Look, I've been exactly where you are. I know you're scared. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but I am going to tell you it's possible." And I thought, yeah, this is what Victor never understood. This is what he was trying to wipe out when he called love a distraction. While all that was happening, my mom started getting better. Not like in a movie where she jumps out of bed the next day, but slowly, steadily, in little ways that felt huge. She stopped falling asleep at the dinner table. Her lab numbers improved. One morning she walked into the kitchen humming made pancakes and said, "You know, I feel like myself again, baby." And I had to turn away and pretend I was busy so she wouldn't see me crying into my coffee. Somewhere in there, Jordan proposed, not with a flash mob or a rented rooftop, just in our cramped living room with my mom watching from the couch. He got down on one knee with his hands shaking harder than they had at any investor meeting and said, "I broke your heart trying to save my own life, and I can't change that. But I want to spend the rest of my life being the guy who stays. Will you marry me?" I said yes. Not because the money made everything shiny and perfect, not because I'd magically stopped being angry about the past, but because by then I'd seen the man he was when no one was watching, the guy who showed up at 3 a.m., when one of our patients' families called in a panic, who took my mom to her appointments, when I was too wrung out to drive, who admitted when he was scared instead of shutting down. We got married in a public park on a warm July afternoon. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs and a little arch, my mom decorated with fake flowers from the dollar store and way too much ribbon. Half the guests were people we'd helped. During the reception, one of them raised his glass and said, "These two literally paid for my second chance at life, so if you're wondering whether love can beat money, yeah, it can, especially when it steals money from the right people." And everyone laughed and cried at the same time. Now, before you roll your eyes and call this a happy ending, let me be really clear. Life didn't suddenly turn into some perfect rom-com because a settlement got wired to an account. There are still nights when I lie awake next to my husband and think about the 5 Christmases I spent alone wondering if he was alive while he was tied to a contract that treated him like an asset instead of a person. There are days when I look at our foundation's numbers and think about all the people we still can't help because there are just too many of them and not enough of us. There are moments when I catch myself enjoying something. A quiet morning, my mom laughing a kid we helped ringing a bell at the hospital, and then feeling guilty because would any of this be happening if a ruthless billionaire hadn't decided to play God with our lives? You know what I mean. It's complicated. That's why I wanted to tell this story the way it actually happened. Messy and uncomfortable and hopeful all at once, because somewhere out there is someone who thinks they're just a line item in somebody else's plan. And I need you to hear this, you are not. You get a say. Even when it doesn't feel like it, you still get a say in what you do with the pain they handed you. So here's where I throw it back to you. If you were me, would you have taken the money knowing where it came from? Would you have forgiven someone who vanished for 5 years if you found out they'd been sick, controlled, desperate, but still chose not to tell you the truth? Do you think using that settlement to help other people is justice, or just another layer of compromise in a system that's already messed up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think I was right, wrong, or somewhere in between. And if you've ever had someone walk out of your life and then show up down the road with an explanation you never saw coming. I really want to hear that story too. Hit like if any part of this hit a nerve, subscribe. If you want more real stories about love, money, power, and second chances, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the worst night of their life might just be the start of a different ending than the one they've been told they deserve.